I found her and I didn't want her to burn up, and God had my back. He had my back, and he had my back, but he still took her and her baby, but she's in heaven with my mom. And she's washing down on me, but now I got to stand up for her baby. I have to raise my child with my other daughters.
January 5th, 2026, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 11:30 at night. A mother is moving through her house on North 26th Street when she smells something that changes everything. She doesn't hesitate. She goes straight to her daughter's bedroom door, the door that has been closed all day, all evening, all night long, and she tries to open it. A 21-year-old man is standing on the other side. He doesn't move. Then he pulls out a gun and points it at her other daughter, who is standing in that hallway doing nothing wrong, going nowhere, a gun in her face. Then he runs out of the house, into the January cold, into the dark. And moments after he disappears, the bedroom catches fire. Michelle forces her way in. The closet is burning. The curtains around the bed are engulfed in flame, and there on the bed is her daughter Gladys, 22 years old, 5 months pregnant, completely still. What Michelle does not yet know is that her daughter was almost certainly already dead before the first match was struck, that the man who just ran had been in that room with her body, for hours, waiting. This is the story of Gladys Johnson, of who she was before that door closed for the last time, of the documented history of threats that preceded that night, of a mother carrying 33 years of grief who ran toward the smoke anyway, and of a case that is not finished. This is the Conviction Files. We go inside the cases that don't fit cleanly in a headline, where the documented facts are devastating enough, but the human story underneath them is what breaks you. Subscribe if that's what you're here for. Before January 5th, before the smoke, before the door. Gladys Johnson was born in Milwaukee and named after her late grandmother, a deliberate act. A family saying, this name means something, and so does she. She was 22 years old, which means she became a mother for the first time at 19 in a city that does not make that easy, and she did it without flinching. Her 3-year-old daughter could already spell, could recite her ABCs, could talk up a storm. That does not happen by accident. That happens because somebody sits on the floor with flashcards, because somebody reads the same book for the 40th time, and the answer is always yes. Gladys was that somebody. Her aunt, Josie Johnson Smith, told the press what she needed the world to know. She was the most loving person you could ever meet. She had a spirit that could lift anyone out of a bad mood. If you were down, she would cheer you up. She was that person, the one who made everything feel a little brighter just by being in the room. That is a specific kind of person, the kind that leaves an absence you cannot fill. By January 2026, Gladys was 5 months pregnant with a baby boy and living back at her mother's house on North 26th Street. The word back is load-bearing. She had been somewhere else. She had left. And the reason she left is the reason she is dead. Her aunt said it plainly in the days after Gladys died. He had threatened to kill her before. That is why she ended up back with her mom. She heard the threat. She believed it. She went somewhere with family around her, other ears in the building, other people between her and the danger. She did what survivors are told to do. The danger came anyway. Now let's talk about Michelle Johnson, because you cannot fully hold what happened on January 5th, 2026, without going back 33 years. New Year's Eve, 1992. A fire breaks out at a family tavern on Milwaukee's north side. Michelle Johnson loses 2 of her sons that night, Terrence Bizzle Johnson, 4 years old, and Antonio Bizzle Johnson, 2 years old, both dead of smoke inhalation. A mother buries 2 toddlers before most people have buried anyone. She rebuilt. She kept going. She had more children. She named one of them after her own mother to carry the family forward, to say, this family is still here and still worth naming children after. That child was Gladys. 33 years later, almost to the day, Michelle smelled smoke in a hallway and ran toward it anyway. She fought a blocked door. She stood down a gun being pointed at another one of her daughters. She pulled Gladys from those flames with her own hands. She did everything a mother can do. And now she is the one raising Gladys's 3-year-old daughter. She said it herself, still in shock at the scene. Now I got to stand up for her baby. I have to raise my grandchild with my other daughters. That sentence contains the full weight of what was left behind. Here is what the documented record shows about the day Gladys died. From morning through afternoon through evening, the bedroom door stayed closed. The family had not heard Gladys's voice since morning, had not seen her come out for food, for water, to check on her daughter, all day, in a house full of people who loved her. According to the theory prosecutors laid out in court days later, Gladys was already dead in that room for several hours before the fire was set. Sit with that timeline. If prosecutors are correct, Cameron Washington sat in a room with the body of a woman he had just killed, in a house full of her family, for hours. He was not fleeing. He was not panicking. He was waiting for the house to go quiet, waiting for the moment when a fire might look like an accident, waiting with the patience of someone who had already decided what came next and was managing the logistics of getting away with it. This is what coercive control looks like at its end point, not a moment of uncontrollable rage, not a surprise, a deliberate, methodical sequence, threats made and documented before, serious enough that Gladys had already left once, and now carried out in the house she came home to for safety. The prosecutor who stood before the court on Sunday chose two specific words, dangerous and deliberate. Here is a question. Gladys had already left. She had heard the threats, believed them, taken her daughter, and come home to her mother's house. And a man with a documented history of threatening her moved into that house with her. So when we tell women to leave, when we hold leaving up as the answer, the action that transfers a woman from danger into safety, are we telling them the truth? Or are we comforting ourselves that there is a right move, a safe move, an action that puts the responsibility somewhere other than the system that allowed this man to follow her home? Gladys did everything right. That is the documented fact. Whether failure actually lives, I don't know, maybe you do. At 11:23 p.m., a call comes into emergency services. At 11:30 p.m., Michelle reaches the bedroom door. She fights her way in, and what she finds is already too late to save. Gladys on the bed, bruises across her body, blood from her nose and mouth. Injuries that preceded the fire. Whatever happened in that room happened before Cameron Washington lit anything. Less than 30 minutes after the 911 call, Milwaukee police locate Cameron Washington approximately 1 mile away at a residence on 29th Street, taken into custody without resistance, a lighter in his pocket. While the family prepared for a funeral, while Michelle was figuring out how to tell a 3-year-old that her mother wasn't coming back, the legal system was moving at the slow, methodical pace of forensics. On Sunday morning, 4 days after Gladys died, Cameron appeared at the Milwaukee County Courthouse. 6 felony charges, first-degree recklessly endangering safety, arson, a combined potential exposure of more than 50 years. But the word the family needed, the word that would say plainly what Michelle already knew the moment she pulled her daughter off that bed, wasn't in those charges yet. No homicide count, not because prosecutors doubted what happened, because the medical examiner's report wasn't finished, because the legal system required documentation for what a mother had confirmed with her own hands. Court Commissioner Maria Dorsey stated it plainly, the report wasn't ready. They would wait for the paperwork to catch up to the truth. The prosecutor didn't wait to say what he believed. He stood in that courtroom and put 2 words on record, dangerous and deliberate, and then he laid out the theory that Gladys had been dead in that room for several hours before the fire was set, that the fire wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. The medical examiner's office eventually confirmed what the family had been living with since January 5th. Gladys Johnson's manner of death, homicide. Here is a question. Prior threats, documented, a woman who already left because of those threats, a man who followed her into the house she moved back to, a bedroom door closed all day, a lighter in a pocket. At what point does documented history become a legally actionable warning that separates two people before it ends this way? And if that point doesn't exist, if prior threats and prior violence are not sufficient on their own, then what are those records actually for? Who are they protecting? I am not asking rhetorically. I am asking because Gladys Johnson is dead and the documentation existed before she was. 4 days after Gladys dies, Michelle Johnson stands before the people who came out in the January cold to remember her daughter, and she can barely stay upright. She keeps saying the same words, "I want my baby back." Not the language grief produces when it has had time to find something socially bearable. 4 days out is still shock. "I want my baby back" is not a sentence about theology or comfort. It is a mother's body refusing to accept what her mind already knows. But even in that shock, she found the essential sentence. She said it to reporters, and it needs to be repeated here. If Gladys didn't want to be with him anymore, she had the right to live her life. Her daughter had a right to her own life. She exercised that right, and it was taken from her. The family started a GoFundMe to cover funeral expenses, because Gladys was 22 years old and nobody had planned for this. Nobody budgets for burying a daughter and an unborn grandson in the same week. The community showed up. People who knew Gladys, people who didn't, neighbors, strangers, all of them in the January cold releasing balloons, because sometimes that is the only thing left to do with grief when the words run out. The 3-year-old is with her grandmother now. She asks questions. She notices things. Michelle told reporters that eventually this little girl will see her mother in a casket and that Michelle will have to find the words to explain it. She said that knowing full well what it costs, because she has already found those words before for 2 other children in a different fire in a different year. She knows exactly what she's being asked to survive again, and she is doing it. Here is the weight of what Michelle Johnson is carrying. She was 33 years into living on the other side of catastrophic loss when January 5th arrived. She had rebuilt. She had named a daughter to carry the family forward through the grief. She had raised that daughter into a woman who poured everything into her own child, who faced danger and made the right call, who came home. The weight of 1992 did not make 2026 survivable, but it made Michelle someone who ran towards smoke without hesitating, someone who knew at the bone level, not the intellectual level, exactly what fire takes. And now she is raising a child who will grow up and want to know the truth about her mother and her father and what happened in that bedroom. When that day comes, and it will, Michelle will have to decide how much truth a child can hold, and when, and in what order. There is no right answer. There is only a grandmother making impossible choices in the ruins of something she never should have had to survive twice. That is the real cost of what Cameron Washington did when he closed that door. Not just Gladys, not just her unborn son, the entire forward motion of a family that had already paid more than any family should be asked to pay. Cameron Washington is in custody. The legal proceedings continue. The homicide charge is coming, the evidence points to it, and investigators recommended it from the moment they arrived on scene. What the final charge looks like, first-degree intentional or otherwise, will determine the scope of what justice means here. But there are questions this case has not yet answered publicly. The full contents of the documented domestic violence history, what was in those records, how recent, how serious, have not been released. Whether anyone in an official capacity was made aware of the specific threats Josie described, the threats to kill, is not yet known. What the 3-year-old witnessed, what she remembers, what she will be able to tell someone when she is old enough to be asked, that evidence, if it exists, has not been made public. And there are people connected to the edges of this case, people who knew about the history, people who saw what was building, whose accounts have not been heard yet. The investigation is ongoing. Prosecutors are still building, and some of what they know has not been presented in any courtroom yet. This is only the beginning. Her name was chosen to carry something forward, her grandmother's name, a family's refusal to be erased by what it had already survived. She heard a man threaten to kill her. She believed him, she left. She went home to her mother and her sisters. She did what survivors are told to do. And the man who made the threat followed her there, closed a bedroom door, and carried out what he had already decided. So here is the final question, and the answer is yours, not mine. Domestic violence documentation existed in this case before January 5, 2026. Threats had been made and reported. Gladys had already left once. None of it was enough to put a wall between her and what happened. So what is the honest accounting of that failure, and whose is it? Is it a system that doesn't treat prior threats as the life-or-death emergencies they are? Is it a culture that still reads a man following his girlfriend back to her mother's house as a private matter between two people? Or is the most honest and most unbearable answer this, that some people, once they have decided, cannot be stopped by any address change or any piece of paper, and that what we are really asking survivors to do when we tell them to leave is not to reach safety, but to reveal the decision the other person has already made? Gladys Johnson revealed it. The decision had already been made. She is gone, and a case is still being built. Drop your answer in the comments. What specifically failed her, at what point, by whom, and what would it have taken to change it? We read everyone. Share this if you believe her name deserves to be remembered beyond the headline it became. Subscribe to the Conviction Files. The case is yours now. Gladys Johnson, 2003-2026, named to carry something forward. She deserved to.